Hey, this is Malak, Nadeen, Salma, and Suha, and today we'll be discussing cognitive biases. We sometimes think that we have complete dominance on our thoughts, that our choices are based on our will and preference. Our judgments are rational and logical for when it's supposed to be. However, our brains might be following misleading paths and systems thanks to cognitive biases. So what are the reasons for such biases? Does our mental interpretation fail us sometimes? And are we aware of the fallacies that we undertake while making decisions? Let's understand. First, let's clarify that we have two thinking systems because our overall mental capacity is limited. System 1, or our reptilian brain, is automatic, fast, parallel, lazy, unemotional, effortless, and the unconscious way of making decisions. This system is inherited from our ancestors, and oh, by the way, we didn't evolve from monkeys, but that's a whole nother story. And it's evolving along the way to help us survive by allowing us to perform sudden actions and judgments.
Our minds don't naturally rely upon logical, rational, or critical thinking processes. It is automatic because it creates responses to things we've encountered before. As a result, it reduces lag and effort.
Like running away when you see a bear. While System 2, our new brain, is the slow, serial, difficult, controlled, and conscious part of the brain. It is responsible for our decision-making, reasoning, and beliefs. For instance, let's say you're looking for your sister in the crowd. Your mind will be focused on a task while recalling characteristics of her or anything that will help locate her. The problem with System 2 is that it's energy intensive, and this is why we don't use it all the time, because our brains are lazy. System 1 is in charge most of the time. We make most of our mistakes because we think we are using System 2 while we are using System 1. To avoid these mental traps, we need to be more aware of our thinking. The interactions of two systems determine how we think, behave, make judgments, and decisions. When it comes to choices, do we choose what is best for our situation? Does the way the options are presented affect our decision? Let's take the question of, are you a risk seeker or do you play it safe? Some might think that their choice will always be constant. However, experiments show that results vary in huge numbers when questions with the same result are presented in different manners. In other words, the frames in which alternatives are offered changes the preference of people. When it comes to taking risks in economic situations, people tend to seek risk and loss frame and adversity and gain frame. In this example, people were asked whether they'd like to gain $900 instantly or whether they'd get a 90% chance of getting $1,000. People picked getting $900 instantly. And when asked after whether they'd prefer losing $900 or having a 90% chance of gaining $1,000, people then switched their choice. Prospect theory is one of the theories that describe the economic behavior where choices are being taken based on the potential value of losses and gains rather than the final outcome. By understanding how people make choices, we see ourselves asking, what sources of information do people base their choices on? When people make their choices, they tend to go by what their conscience tells them rather than by what knowledge is acquired. Studies were made to show the difference between intuition and logic, revealing that cultural differences and background play a great role in affecting the way people make demands or choices. There is evidence to prove that reasoning is affected by the cultural differences mainly between Western and East Asian cultures. Intuition reasoning is the ability of human beings to acquire knowledge without evidence, proof, or having a conscious reasoning. Moreover, it is the reasoning without having an understanding of the process that was involved in acquiring the knowledge. Intuition in Eastern philosophy has often been associated with spirituality and religion. However, in Western philosophy, intuition is not a separate study field. It has been considered as a significant capacity of human reasoning, which they use to make sense of the reality surrounding them. Through intuition, human beings can make quick decisions without having to consider or compare the options that are available. The argument of extensional reasoning is that human being reasoning follows the probability calculus. The theory of extensional reasoning is deductive, which means that conclusions are true if premises are also true. Extension thinking is the meaning that the universe contributes to an individual's mental concept that has been conveyed by the original text. People therefore tend to reason based on external factors that surround them rather than the internal aspects of the object. Bias controls a great deal of why people prefer something over something else. People who tend to avoid biases are still bound to make one without taking note of it. Heuristics and biases can rule our everyday life situations without us even noticing. And even experts can run across these biases when dealing with a great deal of complicated data, which leads them and ourselves to uncertain results. We as people only use a limited number of our heuristics to reach a conclusion, rather than carefully assessing the problem, like for example, determining how near or far an object is by its clarity. There are three main heuristics people use for these complex tasks, and they are: Number 1, representativeness, which is how similar two things are. Usually, the more people think something is related to another, the higher the probability. This heuristic completely takes over and fails to acknowledge important data like prior probability and sample sizes. Furthermore, it leads people to have misconceptions of chance and regression and confidence in validity of information. An example of people's misconception of chance is using the gambler's fallacy. Most people will agree that the first order of coins is more random or has a fairer chance than the second, though there were not many rounds involved. The second is availability, which is when people predict the chances of an event happening per the ease with which they can recall something similar happening. This leads to many biases when assessing data, like the retrievability of these events, or, according to a search set, like for example, recalling words that start with R versus words with R in the middle, in addition to biases of imaginability which can totally affect one's evaluation of a real-life situation. Finally, the third heuristic is the adjustment and anchoring. This occurs when one starts from an initial value and uses it to reach a conclusion, using the initial value as a reference point or an anchor. Ways one can be manipulated by this heuristic are by insufficiently adjusting the data, or overestimating related and underestimating unrelated events, or anchoring in the assessment of subjective probability distribution. Now that we understand just how easily one can become a victim of cognitive biases, we must be more careful as people or as experts with the data that's given to us, to reach the full potential of our brains and make healthier predictions and conclusions. Thank you!